good morning. And this morning we are very pleased to be here with Dr. Roy Morgan in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Good morning, Roy.
Good morning.
Roy, I'd like to begin by asking you, could you provide an overview of who you are and where you work or don't, and the primary focus of your work, either past or present?
Sure. My name is Roy Morgan, native New Mexican. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I am retired. My work career in instructional media is long and varied, actually. I started working part-time at the Audiovisual Center at New Mexico State University when I was an undergrad, working for Phil Dillard, who was, at that point, working on his doctorate at Indiana University. I had become interested in instructional media and technology from a friend of mine who was a high school friend, actually, at Alamogordo High School when I was a wee youngster. And he was a student at Arizona State studying instructional media. And he used to talk to me about that. He was a couple years older than I when he was back from college. So when I was an undergrad at New Mexico State University, I kind of checked out the Audiovisual Center later when I was a junior or something, and met Phil Dillard, and he actually hired me to work there during 2 summers. Well, as it turns out, Phil needed to go back to Indiana to do his dissertation, so he hired me as acting director of the Audiovisual Center for a year and a half while he was back at Indiana. Then I went to Indiana to do my doctoral work, and after I finished that, then I went to work at the Agency for Instructional Technology in Bloomington, which is a large nonprofit producer and distributor of instructional video materials, primarily broadcast television, but I was hired as the manager for non-broadcast materials, which means film and video. And I worked there from 1973 till 1988. And then I did a number of things, but one of those that was very enjoyable was as an adjunct faculty member at Indiana University in the Instructional Systems Technology Department. And I taught the overview media course, which was required for all graduate students in the IST department, as well as for students in the library science college that were going through certification to become a school librarian. When we moved back to New Mexico, I was hired by Access Innovations, which is a local database company. I worked at NICEM for 4.5 years, and then because I'd become so enamored of the computer database field, which was kind of an adjunct to instructional media and technology. I worked for a couple of years for a related company here in Albuquerque called AECT, which was a company that cataloged literature in the field of psychology. And that was a fascinating field, and I worked with the president and CEO of that company here in Albuquerque. And then I decided to retire. So that was kind of the end of my career in instructional media and technology.
Well, can you remind us, what does NICEM stand for?
NICEM stands for the National Information Center for Educational Media. And I can talk more about what we did if you'd like for me to. Okay. NICEM was established in about 1966 at USC, the University of Southern California, and was established as a national and later international database of educational media and materials. What that means is that they started out as a cooperative catalog, but then later became a catalog of all producers and distributors extant materials that existed that were available to schools and libraries and universities and to corporations and businesses. And the database was purchased by Access Innovations in the late 70s and was moved here to Albuquerque. And when I was working at NICEM, it contained somewhat over 400,000 individual bibliographic records, cataloging somewhat over 600,000 individual media items. And our job was to keep that up to date, to continually add items, and we did that from distributor catalogs. And then the original form of its distribution was in print catalogs. And in the old days, some of you may remember, R.R. Bowker published catalogs. And they were multi-volume, huge catalogs of print descriptors of these media items. And school libraries and media directors would use these indexes to find extant materials. So if you were looking up science materials for third grade and you wanted film strips, you wanted films or videos or whatever, you'd look in these catalogs, you would find a descriptor, and then you would find out who distributed that material, and then you would go to that distributor to get access to them. And actually, when Access Innovations purchased the database, one of the first catalogs they published with R. Bowker was in association with AECT. Well, eventually these catalogs became so massive that it became more cost-effective to distribute them on CD and online, and that's one of the things that Access Innovations did, and what I continued to do. One of the highlights of the work that Access Innovations did was to work on the indexing system. And to do that, you need a thesaurus. Most people don't think much about indexing when you're dealing with a database, but in order to search for materials, you really need an accurate logical system of descriptors. And that's why you have indexers, and you have editors who not only write these descriptors based on catalogs from the producers and distributors, but you have people who then assign these descriptors. Well, you need to have a logical set of descriptors that is uniform across the database. And most specialized databases have these, and these are called thesauri or thesauruses, not like Roget's thesaurus, but these are thesauruses. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we created the NICEM thesaurus, which is a set of descriptors which are assigned to the NICEM database. And this is a highly organized, systematic set of words, terms, that are assigned to these 400,000 bibliographic records. Now you would think, well, why can't you just do blunt force keyword searching? Well, you can do that. But if you have these descriptors, then you're more likely to come up with logical results. And search engines use these, you just don't know that. And so often what is done, and one of the things that Access Innovations did, is to create computer programs that use machine-aided indexing. And these are complex algorithms which actually use these thesauri with these computer algorithms that use computers to do the indexing, so that humans don't have to do all the indexing. These are often reviewed by humans, but the indexing is sometimes done by computers along with human help. So that was a great fun project when I was at NICEM. One of the other things that I'm most proud of when I was with AIT, the Agency for Instructional Television, later in technology. And just a brief word, AIT in its day in the 60s, 70s, and 80s was the premier largest producer and distributor of instructional video materials. And some of you may remember what that was, but in those days, 90% of the schools had video equipment in their classrooms, in their buildings. And it is estimated that 30% of teachers used instructional video on a regular basis. And AIT was the primary distributor of those materials to those teachers in classrooms. Yes, there were other major distributors like Great Plains out of Lincoln, Nebraska, and others. And this is not material that is that you think of like electric. Now the name is escapes me, by Sesame Street and so forth. This is the material that's broadcast directly into the classrooms during the day. And in those days, there were huge networks that were established and maintained by states, and those were organized into regional networks, particularly east of the Mississippi on the West Coast. And they were particularly strong in areas like the southeast states, where those states found that it was very cost effective to have instructional television materials broadcast into the schools that could supplement their teachers who may not have been especially adept at teaching subjects, all the subjects such as science and mathematics and social studies and language and all the subjects that are expected in the classroom. And AIT provided a huge catalog of all of these materials, but they were also innovators in creating consortia of states that could gather funds and agree on projects that needed to be provided that had not been provided heretofore. And so they would gather sums, usually in the area of hundreds or even a few $1,000,000, create the projects to the demands of these consortia, and then provide them to those consortia states. I think more importantly, and why I was very proud of, is that AIT was at the forefront, and in fact was the first producer-distributor that allowed off-air recording rights. And so we were very influential in helping to craft the copyright laws that allowed for off-air recording. We allowed all of our products to be off-air recorded, so that led to really a mushrooming of schools demanding VCRs in those days so that they could time shift programs and use them when they wanted to. Record them during the night or record them at one time during the day and then have teachers use them later. One of the things we did in celebration of AIT's 25th anniversary was to hire Bob Carlisle to go to 106 locations in 12 different states and to survey how instructional television was being used in those different locations. And Bob, this was an anecdotal survey, but it showed how important programming, equipment, and support was, and showed how important this was not only to teachers and administrators but to students, and how vastly influential instructional television was in that period. And this was really before computers became so integral to education today. But this was the era when video was replacing film, and it became much easier to use than film and much more widespread. So those are the kind of the things that I did in my career and things that I was most proud of.
How did you get interested in this field?
Well, as I mentioned, I had a friend, Frank Smith, who was a classmate of mine at Alamogordo High School and who went to Arizona State and was studying educational media there. And he used to come home during a couple summers, and he was talking to me about educational media. And so I explored that, visited the Audiovisual Center at New Mexico State University, and thought, hey, this is neat stuff. And so talking to Phil Dillard, who is the director of the Audiovisual Center at New Mexico State, about his experiences at Indiana University, just convinced me that was the area for me. And I've never regretted it for a minute. So I moved from New Mexico across country to Indiana, never having been there, never having visited Indiana University, and absolutely fell in love with the people there, the faculty, the campus, and I've loved every minute of my career.
This is not on the list, but who were some of your faculty mentors at Indiana?
Two in particular. Denny Pett was one of the dearest men I ever knew, especially in the courses dealing with photography, but others as well. And Denny was a friend. He and his wife Jean invited all of us over for meals at their house and other social gatherings. And another person who was extremely influential was Harvey Fry, who was a master, an artist in graphic arts and graphic design. And I think my love of the printed page, my love of images on 2- and 3-dimensional surfaces, my love of anything that has to do with design ethic comes from Harvey, who always said that it's not the equipment you use, but it's the thought that goes into how you create that thing that's more important. He came before the days of computer. I can only imagine what he would have done with a computer, because his artistry with a pen and a ruler and a razor blade was absolutely phenomenal. So the tool was insignificant. It's what you did with that tool that was important. And that's what I learned from Harvey, and we'll never forget it.
Are there any other people who had an impact on your professional growth?
Yeah, my 14 and a half years at AIT, the Agency for Instructional Technology, were very important. Ed Cohen, who was executive director, he founded AIT, was executive director while I was there, was a monument in the field of instructional technology, instructional television technology. Have great respect for Ed. He was a tough taskmaster, but a brilliant man in shaping what instructional television technology was in that period. Formed an incredible board of directors of state superintendents of education, state secretaries of education who came together to direct this agency, was able to get people to fund their monies, pool their monies to fund projects, brought in brilliant producers and directors to create materials, and I think helped change American education by the way instructional television was created and produced and then distributed. So working for Ed was a great honor. I mean, people I worked with were obviously an influence, but he was probably the greatest. This may sound a little boastful, but it's not meant that way. Most of my career has been at the national level. I think I decided late in my career, working on my doctorate, and I must say I finished my academic program and started to work at AIT before I finished my dissertation. And AIT was very generous after I had received notice that I better finish my dissertation or else, to finish my dissertation while I was at AIT. And so by then it was pretty much decided that I would not go into academia. I had already been working at AIT for 3 or 4 years, and I think going into academia at that period, after having worked in industry, so to speak, was probably going to be awkward. And by then I was really, I guess, kind of spoiled, because I had been working in a field that I really liked, and going into teaching full-time, working in that environment didn't seem right for me. Plus, I was seeing what it was like working, as I said, in a national arena. Working for AIT, which was an American-Canadian company, influencing policy that had national dimensions, creating, distributing materials that had an effect on children across North America, both Canada and the United States. Really was... Well, it was fun, but it seemed very important. It was very important. Later on, as I became director of marketing, not just of audiovisual marketing, but of marketing for the whole company. And then later I was director of marketing and creative services, which meant that the editors, the writers of all the print materials, the teacher's guides, worked under me as well. So the work that we were doing on behalf of children in America, of teachers and administrators and media and instructional television administrators throughout America, North America, was very heady stuff, and that's kind of hard to shake, and I really love that kind of work. And when I was at NICEM, the same thing applied. Here we were working on a database that cataloged materials from mainly North America, but from really all around the world. But this database was being used by people, internationally, and we were helping teachers and librarians and media professionals in all kinds of environments to find materials that they wouldn't have found otherwise. And that's a great feeling. It's a great sense of accomplishment when you can help other professionals find materials that help them do their job better. And more importantly, help kids or other learners learn better and help professionals to do their job better. And there's no better feeling than that. So that's the accomplishments that I'm very proud of.
How do you want to be remembered within this profession?
Well, if you haven't found by now, I think what I want to be remembered by is what I've already said. I'm very proud of the work I did at AIT, very proud of the work I did at NICEM. I guess I want to be remembered by, in a very small way, the influence that I've had on helping influence how media and materials have been used in American education, whether it's through policy, getting instructional video recorded and used, getting it priced well so that it's affordable when we were at AIT, getting it available in terms of information when I was at NICEM. Just getting that knowledge out there and making it accessible and available to everybody.
Good. Thanks, Roy. I have one final question that's not on here that I thought to ask you earlier. What was your involvement in AECT during your career?
My involvement with AECT is I was always a member, and when I was both at when I was at AIT and at NICEM, we always exhibited at AECT in the conferences. I was always there. Always went to special events when IU sponsored them at AECT. AECT actually relocated to the AIT building shortly after I left AIT, so I was very proud of that kind of connection, which, although happened after I left AIT, I was very excited about that. So I felt a great affinity to AECT. It was my professional organization, and very proud of the work it did.
Any last words you'd like to leave us with?
I don't think so. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to talk. Hope it's provided some insight to maybe some entities such as AIT and NICEM that you may not have known much about, and I hope I've provided some insight. But thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.